Hi, I'm Dr. Avanti Singh. In over 20 years of practicing both Western medicine and Eastern healing traditions, the most important thing that I've learned is that healing is a journey we take together. So on this podcast, I'll be demystifying Ayurveda and other integrated medicine, showing how these simple, ancient practices are the keys to unlocking a healthy modern life. We are all healing catalysts because healing starts within. It starts with you, and it starts right now. This is a Soulfire production. Episode number 119. Well, hello, my beautiful friends. Welcome back to the Healing Catalyst podcast. I'm Avanti, and I am so happy to be here with you again this week. Thank you so much for sharing a part of your day with me. So I have been getting so many messages from all of you about the episode last week, episode number 118, which was my first Ignite conversation with Dr. Tanmeet Sethi about habits. And I am so thrilled that all of you loved this episode so much. So I would love to know if there are other topics or questions that you have that you'd like me and Dr. Tanmeet to cover in our next Ignite episode, and would love for you to leave a voice message on SpeakPipe, or you can send me a DM over Instagram or send me an email through my website. All of those are linked in the show notes for you. In addition, if you haven't taken the Energy Fix quiz yet, now would be a great time to do that because it'll help you figure out how to align the habits that you want to create for 2024 with increasing your energy and supporting your health. That's also linked in the show notes for you. And it just takes a few minutes and you'll get personalized recommendations from me for you. Okay, so let's move to our episode today. And I have a few questions for you to think about before we get started. If you didn't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, how much more difficult do you think it would be to support your health? If you didn't have nutrition education, how hard would it be to support your health if that was the case? I think that it would be very difficult because food is more than just sustenance. It's a story. It's a tradition. It's a lifeline to our past and our memories and a hope for our future. Today, I'm joined by Ashley Carter, a registered dietitian who has turned her personal journey from growing up in a food desert into a mission to heal and educate through food. Ashley's passion for wellness began at a very young age, watching both her parents try to manage their type 2 diabetes with lifestyle changes and changes in their diet. And when she left home and went to college, she noticed how her environment impacted her ability to achieve health and optimal wellness. After spending 9 years advising her peers in college as a certified peer health educator, she became a nutrition educator and eventually became a registered dietitian and nutritionist. Today, she is a co-founder of Eat Well Exchange, whose mission it is to empower lower socioeconomic communities and Black communities with the access, knowledge, and confidence that they need to eat a nutritious diet within their own food culture. In our conversation, Ashley and I discuss the deep impact of cultural nutrition, the stories our food holds, and the critical importance of access to healthy food options. We also explore how balancing healthier choices doesn't mean losing our connection to our heritage, and how initiatives like Eat Well Exchange are pioneering ways to make this balance a reality for communities facing food deserts and health disparities. So whether you're looking to deepen your understanding of the connections between food and culture and health, or you're seeking inspiration to empower healthier choices in your community, this conversation promises to offer you insights, solutions, and a heartfelt look into the power of healing through food stories. I am so happy to bring you my conversation with Ashley Carter about the power of cultural nutrition and our food stories on our health. Hello, Ashley. It is so great to meet you. I am so excited to talk to you. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I just was so impressed with the work that you're doing through your group Eat Well Exchange. And I would love for us to start with a little bit about your story and how you got down this path to creating this amazing organization and the mission that it has. I always find that when we are in the health professions, when we share our stories, it informs so much of the work we do. And I think that people understand where we're coming from. So I love to hear the stories. So I'd love if you would share that with our community.
Definitely. Well, as stated, my name is Ashley Carter. I'm a registered dietitian, and my upbringing was in Liberty City in Miami, which is a lower socioeconomic community, also considered a food desert, meaning there's not a lot of access to fresh fruits and vegetables. So growing up, both of my parents had diabetes. So my mom and dad had diabetes. My grandmother had high blood pressure and other medical conditions. But for me, that was just a normal day, a normal life. I thought that was like the normal trajectory of a family. That once you get 50 years old, you get diabetes, you get a little bit older, you get heart disease. That's just what I thought happened. And then when I went off to college, well, sorry, unfortunately, when I was in high school, my mother actually passed away from complications of diabetes. And then once I went off to college, that's when I started to see a different environment. I went to school in Tallahassee, so still in the state of Florida, but just, a couple hundred miles up the road. And I saw that there was Publixes on every corner. There was other grocery stores. There was walking paths. There was so many different options. And this led to people living there being healthier. So then it made me start to rethink a lot of my life. And I started to question things and say, hey, the people up here aren't getting sick. Why was my family getting sick? And that's when I really saw that connection between our environment, our food choices and lifestyle, and our overall health. So that's what made me decide to become a registered dietitian. And then after being a dietitian, I thought that was going to solve the problem, but it didn't, because working for the Department of Health for 10 years, I started to notice that even having the education as a dietitian was not impacting people enough because I wasn't teaching them using their cultural foods. So that's what birthed Eat Well Exchange. We noticed, myself and Jasmine, the other co founder, that the people that we were reaching, if you're not talking to them about foods that they're familiar with, foods that they like, foods that they enjoy, they're not going to be as willing to make changes compared to if you're showing them things that are actually like applicable to their day-to-day life. So at Eat Well, we do nutrition education, culinary classes where we teach you how to cook your own foods, and also gardening, food access programs like plant parties, and also free farmers markets.
Amazing. Amazing. Your story is inspiring. And I think that it's just because of your own awareness of what you did not see growing up and then what you saw when you went to college. And having that awareness and noticing the changes is incredible. And the differences and how that led to different outcomes. I think that's so important to notice. And so before we get into sort of this idea of food culture, because I think it's a really important point, it is so incredibly important. And I want to get into it, but I want to just circle back for a second and talk about sort of what your perspective is based on your experience working in these communities, doing the work that you've been doing for so many years. What are some of the most important dietary, nutritional issues that also impact health outcomes that is being experienced by Black communities, lower socioeconomic communities? Because again, we can read about all this and all the data and the studies, but it is so much more meaningful and insightful when it's coming from someone who's working in those communities. So what would you say are the main things that you're seeing that are causing those disparities?
Well, the main thing causing the disparity is access. So, not having fruits and vegetables, healthier food options accessible in Black communities. And I do want to point out it's not only lower socioeconomic, because a lot of times people put Black and lower socioeconomic together, but sometimes there are higher income Black communities that are still not having the access to these grocery stores. So just not having those foods around that are easy to get to, not having farmers markets. I didn't know about that until I went off to college. So just access overall. And the next is knowledge. And knowledge is the hugest It's a very big barrier because even if you don't have a lot of foods around you, if you don't have a Trader Joe's, a Whole Foods, those, big health food stores around you, you can still learn how to eat healthy with the foods that you have. So just not having that knowledge and also just being told so many things that are not true. Like an example that I was told growing up is that diabetes runs in your family. So that automatically starts you off feeling like no matter what I do, I'm going to get it. So why am I going to try hard? And why am I going to change my life when it's already in my blood, pretty much? And that's not true. I always say it's not true. And then the third thing that I would say that's really creating a barrier when it comes to Black communities and eating healthier. So we said knowledge, we said access, and also I would say taste preferences. And what I mean by that is just not knowing how to cook foods in a manner that's going to still taste very good, that's still going to be satisfying, but also healthy as well. And this also comes to rewiring our taste buds. And what I mean by that is just teaching ourselves that everything doesn't have to taste sweet and everything doesn't have to be spicy and everything doesn't have to have these high sodium flavors. So you can still have flavorful food, but it's also us learning how to dial back those expectations of flavor as far as not wanting everything to taste sweet.
Right, right. I think those are important points. I find that that's actually something that is common. This taste preference piece is very common in many cultures that are here in the United States, especially because we are trying to eat in this American way, which I don't know what that means because it's a melting pot, right? And we're trying to adapt so much of our food preferences, tastes, the cultural foods that we have to this quote American way of eating. And that maybe is the backwards way of thinking about it. It's sort of more that let's adjust healthy eating, healthy cooking, preparation into our food culture, into the foods that are part of our own cultures that we come from. So I think that's a really important point. And some of the things that I've looked up, so many of the diet related chronic diseases, right, that we're seeing in Black communities specifically, right? Increased rates of heart disease, diabetes, kidney disease, hypertension, cancer, all related to diet, right? And we know that food is medicine for everybody. And then you add these other pieces that you're talking about, which is access and knowledge, right? It creates a lot of barriers. And, another thing that I've really been thinking about is that many of these issues that are systemic issues in health, health access, health knowledge, is really about getting to the root cause. And it's something we talk about in Ayurvedic medicine. It's you can put a band-aid on the symptoms because you don't want people to suffer in the acute sense, but you always need to get to the root cause. Otherwise, it just keeps coming back, right? And I feel like that's really what you're talking about with what your mission is at Eat Well Exchange, is to start getting to the root causes to affect the change.
Right. And I'm just so happy you said that because recently I was talking to a mental health therapist about this and we decided to do a program together, but that's another story. And just because a lot of times when people talk to me as a dietitian, they're telling me the end product. They're telling me that they're eating chocolate cake and that they're eating ice cream and cookies and they're eating French fries every day. But that's the end product. You're doing that not because you want to eat French fries every day. You're doing that because you're stressed out at work. You're doing that because, your kids are, driving you crazy at home and now you just want a moment of peace at the end of the night, and that's you eating a piece of chocolate cake. So it's like, I can tell you to swap out your cake for dark chocolate, trail mix, or something like that. But at the end of the day, the issue that you're dealing with is stress. So until you fix that, me giving you my nutrition recommendations, like you said, is just putting a band aid on top of a large issue. So it's so important. And again, that's the importance of this interprofessional connection, because when we work with each other, we're able to see a greater change than just myself as a dietitian. We need a mental health therapist. We need, physicians. We all have to work together for one person to really make the impact that we need to see.
Right. And it's exactly that. And it's also coming at it from all these different perspectives, right? The mental health piece, you know, the actual physical physiology piece coming from a physician, you coming from your perspective. But then also, I think it's really important what you're talking about, this idea of maintaining cultural food traditions. Talk to me about that. So, what do you really mean by that? Let's sort of dig a little deeper into that because that is a really big root cause, right? That we were getting at. Let's talk about this because I think it's a really innovative and important perspective to come from.
Yes. So the reason why we focus on maintaining cultural foods is because our culture tells a story of our history. Our foods tell a story of our DNA. It tells a story about our traditions, our weather, your geographical location. The type of food you eat can tell an entire story about you. So now, if we replace those foods, we're getting rid of your story. We're getting rid of your traditions. We're getting rid of your family members. And I'm sure you can probably remember a dish that your grandma cooked right now. And if I was to tell you that you can't eat that dish anymore, it's going to remove a big chunk of that memory you have of your grandmother. So by taking away our cultural foods, it's very harmful for our history. And also, it's impossible. And what I mean by that is it's so challenging to remove these foods that we love. So now, again, we're creating a barrier. Because if I tell you that if you want to eat healthy, like let's say for me, my mom used to make the best mac and cheese. So if you tell me that if I want to be healthy, I can't eat mac and cheese anymore, maybe it's possible that I do it. But if I can't, I'm going to feel like, well, see, I can't be healthy because I can't stop eating this. Instead of helping me build around that and say, well, why don't you add some broccoli to your mac and cheese? Why don't you use maybe a plant based cheese? Or why don't you put a little bit less cheese and then some nutritional yeast so that way you're decreasing some of the saturated fat? So if we modify those foods, people are going to be more likely to make a change than if you say you have to remove the food completely. So it's just so important to just keep those traditional foods and those memories and traditions on our plate.
Yeah. So I have to tell you, I just had chills because what you said was such an aha. This idea that the foods are our stories.
Yes.
That is profound. Like that's a mic drop for me. Like I have to take that in for a second because yeah, that's so important. I mean, that is so much of what, I'm trying to do with, Ayurveda is also looking at the root cause is all about your story. How did we get here? Right. And that's what you're talking about. Let's talk more about that because this is huge. So tell me how did you like sort of figure that out? And I mean, it's probably your experience, but like tell me when that became the aha for you in the work that you're doing.
It was like a ongoing aha. I can say that because I can think of a
Yeah.
couple of different moments. For one of them, we were providing a nutrition presentation for a WIC program in Michigan, I believe. I think that was when it was Michigan. And we had everyone share their favorite food. And so I couldn't see them. It was like in a chat that they were dropping their favorite foods. And just from the foods they were putting, I was able to learn so much about them. So the people that like seafood, that means you have to live somewhere near a coast. Someone else mentioned that they liked comforters. So more than likely they have family from the Caribbean or Bahamas where comforters is common. So based off of what somebody likes to eat, it already is going to start telling you a lot about them as far as their income status, their geographical location, their traditions. And then the next step to that is not only am I learning more about where you're from and a little bit about your family, but also the expression. When someone talks about food, you see them smile. And even me, like when I talk about mac and cheese, it's macaroni and cheese. It's not that great. I used to eat other things, but it's that memory of my mom. So we went around the room and people talked about their food, they're lighting up. And one lady talked about spaghetti and meatballs and she started crying. And it's like, you're not crying because spaghetti and meatballs are that good. You're crying because it reminded her of her aunt. That was what she made for her every Saturday. So it's like food is such a way that we connect with each other. It's just a big piece of that puzzle of our family.
Right. Oh my gosh, so many ahas going off in my head right now. Yeah, I mean, why would I not? I mean, it's sort of like I'm thinking, why is that not obvious? I should realize that, but it's
We
a
don't talk
huge
about it.
oh, yeah, it's a huge awareness because, when you talk about sales, right? Realtors, I have a lot of friends who are realtors and they always say, bake some fresh cookies, before you have a home showing, because the smell of that cookies will be nostalgic for people who come in and they can see themselves in the home because they have memories of their grandmother making cookies for them or making cookies with their mom, right? So right there, that's exactly what you're talking about, is that foods and smells, they evoke memories. And so much of that is the root cause of why we want to eat them, why we want to engage with those foods, because it brings up memories of comfort, of family, of fun, security, right?
Yes. And
So interesting.
sorry, I was just
Yeah.
thinking as you were talking,
Yeah.
I remember
Yeah.
on the other end of that, whenever you go to a doctor because you're diagnosed with a medical condition, they're going to tell you you cannot eat certain foods. So I did have a client once, and she told me that she's Cuban, and her doctor told her that she could not have plantains anymore, and she could not have yuca, and she couldn't have a lot of her cultural staples. So, what does that mean? Now she can't go to her mom's house anymore for Sunday dinner. So she's like, "I'm grieving my food." That's the terminology she used. She's like, "I'm grieving right now." She's like, and it's not because someone passed away, it's because my food has been taken from me. So it's also that connection too, where sometimes as healthcare professionals, we're so caught up on the numbers and glycemic index and all of these things, which are important, but at the end of the day, that's not it. If we take away those foods and we rob somebody of their culture and their traditions, we're going to cause more stress and harm than with them eating that food periodically.
Right, right. Or finding or understanding what the story is behind that food and
Right.
then coming up with solutions, right, with the person.
But we're
If
not
I
taught that.
understand that's right, that Sunday night dinner is really important to you, I can hear it. Let's talk about that. What can we do to make it an enjoyable, wonderful experience and at the same time support your health, right? So there's these stories that are attached to the food. But another thing that you talked about was food deserts.
Yes,
And so I really want us to explain to the listeners, what does that actually mean? How do you see that? This is a big problem, I know, in the United States, especially, is the problem of food deserts. And so let's talk about that first, because that is a huge impact on the dietary and nutritional needs of many communities.
yes. So, about 19 million residents in the United States are considered food insecure. And this means that you're living in an area that does not have access to a grocery store. In a urban area, that's about 1 mile. In a rural area, that's about 10 miles. So, this means that you don't have convenient access to a store that's going to sell fruits, vegetables, and a lot of whole grains and options like that. This does get a little tricky because some areas do not know that they're a food desert. You do not drive into a community and there's a sign saying food desert with
Right.
tumbleweed coming across the street. Like,
Right.
it
Right.
doesn't look like that. In these areas, some of them are actually called food swamps. And what that means is that they do not have access to affordable fruits and vegetables, but they have fast food places on every corner. They
Yeah.
have liquor stores. They have corner stores. So sometimes
Mhm.
those areas are heavily saturated. And in Black communities and lower socioeconomic communities, they're 2.5 times more likely to have an abundance of those fast food places.
Mhm.
So,
Versus the grocery stores.
exactly. And even the grocery stores, I kind of want to say that in quotes, because when you look at a list of what they consider, sometimes they'll classify CVS or Walgreens as a grocery store. And other times they'll classify meat markets as a grocery store. And I'm not saying you can't buy groceries there, but it's very limited when it comes to vegetables in some of those meat markets and CVS. Like, they don't have fresh produce like that. Maybe an orange and a banana and frozen foods, but you couldn't really go there to shop for groceries for the week for your family. And this creates a problem because if you don't have access to healthier foods, you're going to purchase something else. And also, it creates, you have to map out a whole plan just to eat healthy. And if we have to do that, what are the odds that we do it? We have enough stuff on our plates. So it really creates a huge barrier to eating healthy when you don't have those foods that are accessible to you.
Right, right. And yeah, it's exactly that. And it's just becomes easier because if you need to eat, you're going to eat what's readily available.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, the cost of many
Mm.
of these fruits and vegetables is much, much higher than going to the corner fast food chain and getting a burger and fries and a soda, right?
Right.
It's many times cheaper to eat that versus being able to get the groceries for a fresh meal at home with vegetables and fruits and fresh spices or
Mm.
grains and lentils and things like that, or even healthy meats, right,
Right.
that are lower in fat and a higher quality. And so that becomes an issue too, right?
Definitely. It's a huge issue just because that's where that education part comes in as well. Because if no one's really teaching you how to calculate a unit cost, and that's when you look, when you're at the grocery store and you find out how much something costs for the entire amount and then what it means per unit. If you don't know how to calculate that, you may go to Dollar Tree or somewhere else and then feel like, oh, well, this is cheaper because it's $1. But it's like, no, you're getting a lot less. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you don't know how to shop, if you're stressed, if you have 4 kids that are doing all these different things and you're getting off of work late, you feel like it's the easiest affordable option to get to fast food. But in actuality, it's not because rice is very inexpensive. Beans are very inexpensive. So it's like if you can just buy rice and beans and, you know, add some vegetables, that would be a much more affordable meal than spending $60 at a fast food place.
Yes, exactly. It's I mean, such a good point. And it's that misconception, right? Also that, the one meal costs $5 or $10 versus you can buy 5 to $10 of rice and beans that would be multiple meals, right? It's a misconception that so many of us have about cooking and eating. So let me go back to again, this idea of cultural food traditions, how do you then, and you kind of alluded to this, how do you balance, right? The information as a dietitian and nutrition and the chronic diseases that are caused by different foods, and at the same time, hold those cultural traditions, those food traditions, right? Because it's hard to do that. It's straddling those two things. And how do you approach that so that you can have, the clients that you're working with be successful? So how do you tell me how you do that? Because I find that's a challenge for me too.
Right. I was going to say that's my secret. I can't tell you. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, what I do is I like to focus on what people like. So whenever I'm meeting with
Mhm.
whether it's an individual client or in the community, I always ask them, "What's your favorite food?" And I'm a dietitian, so people always tell me
Yeah.
what they think they should say.
They-
So, "Oh, I like a salad with vinegar," and it's like, "You might like that, but tell me for real, like, what do you love to eat? Like, if you can have anything right now, like, what would that dish?" And then they tell me, and I say, "Okay, what about the holidays? Like, what do you like to eat for the holidays?" They're like, "Ooh, I don't eat this often, but I like to eat a sweet potato casserole." "Ooh, what else do you like?" So I pry and then once I find out all of those foods they like to eat, the next thing they always say is, "Oh, I know, but those foods aren't good." And then that's when I come around and I say, well, some of them aren't the best, but let's take those same concepts and build around them to make them into a healthy dish. So you like that sweet potato casserole? Okay, great. Sweet potatoes are high in fiber. We can keep those on our plate. Maybe let's just put less honey in it this time. And instead of the marshmallows, why don't we just shave some walnuts or almonds, put them on top for a little crunch, and then still put half the amount of marshmallows on them to give that same flavor that you're used to. So pretty much what I do is I take what they're eating, I highlight the benefits of it. That's number 1. I let them know you're doing something right, everything you're doing is not terrible. And then I find the areas that are not the best, and I find swaps that are going to be comfortable for them. And when I say not the best, that's typically a food that is high in fat, high in sugar, or high in sodium. And then what I'm looking to add is usually fiber. So fiber is found in fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. And by adding fiber, we're going to help decrease cholesterol, blood sugar levels, and also improve satiety. So that way they can feel full longer. So that's typically what I'm going to add. And then just making dishes more complete because a lot of times we're just eating grains and protein for a lot of the cultural dishes. So now it's just adding vegetables, asking them, are they okay putting onions in there? What about peppers? Do you like garlic? Adding different herbs too. So that way we get those anti-inflammatory and antioxidant properties from the turmeric, from the curry, from the thyme and basil and cilantro. So just really adding more herbs to the food and replacing some of those high sodium seasonings. And then by the end, I still want them to be able to recognize these dishes and say, okay, this still reminds me of my sweet potatoes. This still reminds me of my collard greens. It still reminds me of my cornbread, but it's just a little bit healthier. And the reason why this is important is because we're not changing for today, we're changing for life. And if you have to do a change that you're fighting to eat the sweet potatoes, you're not going to do that for long. So if I meet you where you are, I honor your foods, we celebrate your foods, we add healthy additions to the food, it's going to encourage you to make this change forever and still honor your
Right.
culture.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing, and those are all beautiful strategies as a health professional. And I'm also hearing what you're doing is you are hearing that
Mhm.
person's story. You're being present to what is really going on for them.
You're giving me
You're
chills.
understanding, you're digging, right? That's really what you're doing is you're honoring that person who's sitting across from you. And you're saying, tell me your story because you are trained to listen to the foods and extract the information of the stories and ask the next question. And that is so deeply important to any human, but especially to communities that are marginalized, because so much of
Mhm.
what happens for marginalized communities in this country, in the United States, is their stories are being erased all the time.
Yeah, and that's honestly what really, when you were talking, it just gave me chills because that's what I hear so often from the people that I talk to. For a lot of the clients and community members, they typically tell me, like, no one has ever asked me that before. And it's like, how small do you feel when you walk into somebody's office and once you sit down, they look at you and they're like, oh, Black woman, she likes fried chicken. And it's like, I don't even eat meat, you know? So it's like, it's one of
Right,
those things
right,
where it's like, you feel so small when someone looks at
right.
you and they start telling you, "Oh, how'd you let yourself get like this?" And these are real words that I've heard from someone before. That a doctor said, "Well, how'd you let yourself get like this?" And then, "Oh, well, if you probably need less fried foods," and just assuming they know you. And it makes you feel so small because in those moments with a healthcare professional, you don't feel empowered to speak up for yourself and say, "Well, actually, I don't eat that." You just sit there and take it and get smaller and smaller and smaller. So it's like if someone actually cares about you and someone says, "Well, what do you like?" It makes you feel like I'm a part of this. Like what I want and what I like matters. And that's such like an empowering feeling to know that you're in the driver's seat when it comes to your health and your life. Like you have some control. And as you mentioned, in a lot of marginalized communities, that's not the feeling. You don't feel like you matter sometimes and you don't feel like anyone cares. So just listening to someone really can change their life.
Right, right. It's incredible what you're talking about. I'm so yeah, I'm so inspired and moved by what you're talking about because it is really about listening to people's stories, that food, that connection to the foods that you're eating. It's the memories, it's the stories that are in there. So here's what I want to get into though. This is a bigger issue, right? So we can teach healthcare providers to start doing this, right? And whether they're anybody along the spectrum, whether it's a physician or a dietitian or a health coach, if we can help them understand that understanding the stories behind the food choices is so important to getting to the change, that's the first step. We can start doing that. And I'm not saying that's easy either, because
Mhm.
that's a systemic change, right? But let's get into this idea of the food deserts. Like, what are you seeing as, some of the solutions? Because the best solutions always come from the people on the ground doing the work, working in those communities. It comes from those communities. I'm a big believer in that. And so, how do you see addressing this issue of food deserts? Because even if I sit there with a patient and I'm understanding their stories and I'm saying, okay, let's adjust this food. Let's understand the importance of this sweet potato casserole, right? How do they get the ingredients
Right.
that maybe we want to swap? right? To add the cilantro or to add the spices,
Mhm.
the turmeric, where are they going to get that stuff? Like, how do we, like, that's got to be a huge challenge for you in the work that you're doing. How are you dealing with that?
Yes, definitely. When it comes to food insecurity, it's just like a huge mountain that we continuously have to climb. Um, I say 3 things minimum need to happen at once. Number 1, we need immediate help. So for us at Eat Well Exchange, the immediate help that we offer is we do free farmers markets. So this is just like a farmers market, but everything is free. And this is a pop up that we do. We typically use any grant funding that we get or donations to host these. And also, we're not just giving out food, we're providing education and we're smiling and having conversations. And this is important because we have all the food labeled. So all the green food is in one section with the benefits of green foods. And as somebody walks over, I say, hey, I know you mentioned, you have low iron levels. These green foods will help you. What do you like to eat? Do you like bitter, sweet, salty, whatever? So this is all going to help them. And then, so that's immediate. That's giving people food in that moment they can take home and cook. And then we need long term. So long term is going to be mapping out more grocery stores, which is hard because most grocery store companies, they forecast 10 years in advance where they want their stores to be located. And a lot of times they're not choosing the lower socioeconomic communities until they're gentrified or in the process of gentrification, which is not going to benefit the people that are living there now. But there's community gardens. So community gardens, I don't always recommend first just because maintaining a garden is a lot of work. So if there's a community garden, I recommend having it attached to something. So that's a church, that's a sorority, that's an organization, that's a community center. So that way somebody feels ownership of this plot of land that anybody can go to, but this is going to grow vegetables and fruits and herbs long term. And then the third item is policy. So there needs to be policy changes when it comes to the zoning, the designing, the districting, where you're saying, and I'm not a big policy person, so like,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
what I
Mhm.
am saying is
Right.
somebody needs to have their
Right.
hands in this and be at these meetings when they're trying to add more, corner stores and gas stations and other things. Someone needs to be able to advocate and say, no, we don't want that here. No, don't build a highway in the middle of our community because we need to be able to reach the public that's over there. And in every area that I mentioned, community members need to be in the driving seat or passenger seat with the GPS. I was going to
Right.
say with the map,
Yes.
but I don't want to date
Yes.
myself.
Yes.
But they, they, the community has to be in there because if it's not community driven or community operated, eventually it's either not going to serve the community anymore or the community is not going to feel like it's for them. And being a girl from Liberty City, that happened all the time. People would come in and they would build stuff and do all these festivals. And I didn't feel like it was for me because when I look at the people doing it, I didn't know any of them. So I just felt like this is for someone. It's just not for me because even though you're in my community, you don't identify with us. And that's deeper than race. That's, being a part, someone that I know as a community
Yeah.
member.
Right. Yeah. And so that's why it's so important that these solutions, like I said, they come from within the community, from the people who are doing the work, who are familiar to that community, right? That have a relationship with that community. That's how you create those solutions. So, you have all these amazing programs that we'll Eat Well Exchange, and you've told us about so many of the different initiatives you have. How do you measure the success, right? Because I mean, the kind of funding that you're talking about requires data. That's always, sort of part of that process. How are you measuring the success of your initiatives, and how are you deciding what initiatives to do? Because there's so many that you can do. How do you kind of, sort through that process? Let us in on how you do that. What do you do?
Well, that's an evolving process. I can tell you that when we first started Eat Well Exchange in 2017, that first year we probably reached 100 people. And then I know by like 2020, we reached 1,000 people. And last year alone, we served 15,000 to bring us to a total of 31,000 people since 2017. So that shows you how our numbers are just like doubling and doubling and
Yeah.
doubling every single
Yeah.
year. So at first, we
Hmm.
mainly focused on numbers, like how many people are we educating? But now we do more pre and post surveys. So as an example, for the free farmers market, We ask people what are their barriers to get to a grocery store. We ask them how often they're eating fruits and vegetables. We ask them the cooking methods that they're using for their fruits and vegetables. And then we do post assessments if we see them again to find out if that has increased since you had more access. Or our kids' culinary program, even though they're young kids, let's say the group that's K through second grade, we have them do like a little survey with smiley faces where they tell us what part they like. Do you like cooking? And they give us a big smiley or a straight face or a frown. And we use like the emojis so that way they can tell us like any changes. So for us, it's really getting that baseline, finding out how often people are eating fruits and vegetables, which is an important part for us. Um, whatever barriers are having, and then also what has changed. So after we came and talked to you, did you just feel good in the moment? Or are you actually eating more? Are you more empowered? Did you learn about your cultural foods? And then based off of like community need, that's how we develop programs. And I can tell you that a recent example is we started a program in Little Haiti that's in Creole. And that's because one of our volunteers mentioned to me, oh, it's nice that you're a dietitian. We don't have anything like this in my community. And I'm like, that's true. I don't really know any Haitian dietitians. And he's like, yeah, we don't have anything like this. So with his support, because I'm not of Haitian descent, so with his support, we were able to develop a curriculum for the Haitian community. And that's a big thing for us, not just taking my program for African Americans and making it for Haitians, but really changing the food, changing the topics. So that way it's customized. And the same, we do a program in Spanish. Same thing, everything is customized. And for us, we develop new programs based off of the need that we're seeing from the community and then just developing it using the community as the center of that program and then measuring to make sure that if I design this program to help decrease heart disease, we check blood pressure before and we check it after the program to see if this has actually made a difference.
It's amazing. And so what's next for Eat Well Exchange? Like, what do you see? You guys are growing. You said you gave us the numbers. You're serving more and more people every year. What's next?
Well, our three focus this year. Number one is impacting more men, reaching more men. And that one's personal, just because I know so many men that are in their 40s that are dying from heart attacks and just not even knowing that they had prior health concerns. So this year, we're really focused on reaching more Black men and having programs designed for Black men. So that way they feel comfortable in these spaces because we know, because of history, a lot of times Black men just don't feel that they have a space or voice when it comes to different classes, even when it's led by a Black woman. So we're really creating more spaces for Black men to feel more in charge of their health and comfortable to discuss. The next thing that we're working on is more individual programs. And what I mean by that is right now we have a lot of partnerships where an organization will invite us out to do a cooking class for them. But we're trying to do more standalone programs so that way everyone knows, and I'm making this up, so no one show up, okay? Everybody knows every second and fourth Tuesday you can meet us at, the local park and we're doing a cooking class. So we're trying to do more standalone programs. And the last is family-centered education. So that's having the grandbaby and grandma and mother, daddy, everybody there. So that way we're educating the entire family at once. And that stemmed from the program in Little Haiti. That's what we've noticed, that a lot of people bring their grandma, they bring their child, and we notice the conversations. We really want to foster more of that.
Yeah, because in those communities, it's very much about like the communal family eating, family meals, right? And so, really, it all affects, right? Because again, if it's stories, right, that are connected to food and this food culture, it's about families
Right.
also, right? And so, educating everyone and talking to everyone about the story of the foods that they're making is important in educating that. That's brilliant. It's amazing. It's
Thank you.
really, really brilliant. And so, how can anybody who's listening help you, support you? What would you say we could do to help you? And we'll make sure we link everything in the show notes for the listeners, but tell us a little bit about what we could do to help.
Thank you. The main help is just connections, usually. So that means if you know an organization that is in need of a culinary program or in need of nutrition programming, connect them to us. Also, any foundations. If you know of a foundation that would love to support the initiatives that we already have, we would love that as well. And also we do take personal donations too. So if you're able and willing to support one of our programs, we have a donor box on our website where you can see how much your gift will be able to make an impact, and just staying connected with us, because we've only grown in numbers just from people. So we really don't do any, boosting or advertising or paid advertisements or anything. It's literally just one person telling another person who's telling another person who posts on Instagram and tells another 30 people. So just continue to spread the word about Eat Well Exchange and culture focused nutrition and staying connected with us.
Yes, that's wonderful. And so I just have one last question because I know we're coming up on a time, and it's something that I always ask my guests when they come on the podcast, because the podcast is called The Healing Catalyst. And so if I offer up the phrase to catalyze healing, what comes up for you?
To catalyze healing, I'm thinking over our conversation, and a lot of it had to do with know your food story.
Mm,
So
yeah,
to be that
yeah,
catalyst, know
yeah.
the story of your food. And then from there, that's going to guide you, because you're going to know what matters. You're going to know your values pretty much when it comes to food.
Mhm,
And once you know that, you're going to be able to understand what you will or will not be able to adjust. And then
mhm.
also how you can maintain those memories and those values while still being healthier.
Yeah. Ashley, thank you so much. This has been a really inspiring and enlightening conversation. I know I'm going to be thinking a lot about this idea of food and the stories and the memories as how we make changes and how we see ourselves. So thank you so much for this. I really, really appreciate your time, and the work you're doing is so important. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation as well, Dr. Avanti.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime. Thank you. Thanks again for listening to The Healing Catalyst. If you love what you heard, please hit follow and pass it along to a friend. And if you're feeling really inspired, please rate and review so that others can find this podcast more easily. To learn more, head to avantikumarsingh.com. And to connect with me directly, find me on Instagram at avantikumarsingh. I'll be back next week and hope that you will be too. Until then, remember, with the right catalyst, you have the power to activate your own healing, because healing starts within.